thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to be here with Paris Cutler today. She's kindly given us some time to have a chat about one of the most important issues, I think, to any business, and that is people. So really looking at how we attract and how we retain high-performing talent, or great talent generally, into our businesses. So thank you, Paris. Thank you for joining us and taking some time out.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. I know that you have you've built some really interesting businesses over the years, and in particular, I think is it cake decorating business?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very exciting. And you had a team there. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So I actually, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know how to go about it. And I started off in stockbroking as a trader. So I worked on the trading floor back when they still had one. And then I went off and studied law, and worked in a number of different businesses, set up a couple of consultancy companies, and then eventually decided I wanted to go into the B2C space. I was really looking to create a big brand. That's what I wanted to do, that I could put multiple revenue streams underneath it. And I came across cake decorating as an underdeveloped industry and something that I could really create a brand in, because it was quite unpopular at the time. This is back in 2001. So I bought a very small little cake company and I grew that. Eventually we were operating over internationally. I had schools all over Australia, and, it was very much the number one brand in Australia. And, we had TV, I had books, etc. In terms of people, I had a team of about 20 full-time staff at its peak and about 50 kind of part-time staff and casuals.
Yeah.
So, and a big part of Planet Cake was learning how to hire and develop great talent, because obviously I was looking for people with very specific skill sets for what I needed. And yet being an entrepreneur, we didn't have all the money in the world to be able to pay people top dollar. So I got pretty versed in how to attract talent on a shoestring.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that a lot of this is one of the things that I talk to clients about all the time is, we don't have the money to pay top dollar in the industry. Okay, so how do you differentiate? How do you become a brand not only that people want to buy, but that people want to work for? So what are some of the things? Can you give me the top 3 things that you did that you think really gave you that element that differentiated you in the industry?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest differentiator, and I can't underestimate this, is to become an industry leader yourself.
Right.
So, for the first 3 to 4 years that I was developing the business, it is difficult, and there's a lot of kind of compromise that goes in terms of attracting talent. But once we became an industry leader and I fully set ourselves up as number one, that was it. Attracting talent wasn't a problem. But up to that point where we were recognized as an industry leader, I really had to meet people where they were at. So that would look like a consultation with each person that we brought on board. I can't pay you top dollar, but what can I do to facilitate your work-life balance, what's important to you, your career? And then I would make sure that I would design a career for them that would address their real needs. So money is very rarely their real need. I mean, we all have money requirements up to about $70,000. After that, people have very real needs that are quite different. Career, work-life balance, health. I had one employee that wanted to spend 6 months of the year in Thailand as a Muay Thai fighter.
Right.
And so I designed her job that she could spend 6 months of the year in Thailand. And then when she was working for me, she would be working 14 hours a day. So I was just really, really flexible in what does this job, for me really look like? Do they need to be here every day, for example? And by able to be flexible and create jobs that were specific to them, I mean, the sky was the limit for me. I got not only some of the best talent, but they stayed with me for years and years.
Yeah. Retention is key. It costs so much money to turn people
so much. Yeah.
And so that's fantastic. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs get caught up in the rush and the the busyness of building a business, and don't necessarily stop to take stock of the importance of the people piece and put those things in place. So how did you manage that for yourself? Because it takes longer. Does it take longer to spend that much time with individuals and create things that
so much longer. It's a big investment, as anyone listening to this knows. And I know that some of you listening to this are just like inner groan. Really? Like, when am I going to have time to spend on my business? Here is the story that I give everybody and how I learned this lesson. I learned this lesson really painfully. And when I tell this story, people never forget it. And this is the moral to the story about why you invest in people. When I initially bought the business, obviously I was very green. I had a lot of corporate experience, but I didn't have experience in a creative industry like this or a manual labor kind of industry like this. And so what I did was I took the corporate approach and I just raced out there and said, who are the top cake decorators in Australia? How much does it cost to hire them? And how can I lure them on board? So I found the top cake decorators. I was able to poach them. Yes, I do poach people. I'll admit that. And I brought them on board and paid them more than we could afford, because I knew that that's what I required. If I wanted to become the number one brand, I had to have the best people. Great. No problem. They were very ill-suited in terms of values and culture and my management style to my business. Now, what that looked like in the end was one of the scariest episodes of my career. So there were two main instigators and then a number of kind of underlings. And they waited for 2 years until, there was a lot of tension during that period and me finding my feet in the business. But they waited until my business was just at its peak. So we'd just done a big celebrity cake, Leighton Hewitt's wedding cake. I just had a massive influx of orders, and they stopped work, came to me and said, we want 50% of the business and we want pay rises, or we quit.
Wow.
And I had all of these cakes that needed to be made, like huge, big celebrity event producers. They waited till a crucial moment. And of course, you can't have your business held to ransom. So I asked them to leave, and I didn't have enough money in the bank account to actually give refunds on those cakes. I'd spent it all on supplies. And so I had to go to my competitors who I'd never met before and beg them for their staff after hours and pay triple time to get people I didn't know to come in and finish those cakes. Now, the moral to that story was a very, very painful lesson, in that finding people with the right values and culture fit and training them myself was of paramount importance. So people became my first focus, because I had seen the flip side of how much damage can be done if you don't hire the right people and you're just hiring on skill set. So I created my school, which went on to become the biggest in the Southern Hemisphere. I created, a values-based culture, which became the most powerful asset of my company, and an asset that people actually came and worked for me for free just to work in that culture and for the education. And it turned it all around. But unless I'd had that, when I say that story, people are like, no way. But that's what happens. And it happens that's an extreme lesson, but it can happen to a lesser degree. I walk into toxic workplaces all of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear these stories all, and I'm always shocked and surprised at. And I'm often shocked and surprised how long people let it go. So it's phenomenal that you immediately dealt with it and just and sorted the problem out. And that goes to your values and how and that's how you run a business. And that again is why people will come and work for you and why they'll stay with you. And that's why you're getting the longevity now, is because you've got that values fit right, which is awesome. Yeah,
I agree totally.
And it is a little bit of back work as well, in terms of getting those values right and getting your purpose right, and really knowing what that is. Even getting to that point is quite a lot of work. Thinking, we run workshops with clients all the time where it's actually, okay, so what is our actual purpose? What is our actual why, before we even get close to, who are the people we should be hiring in the business. So again, it's taking away from an entrepreneur's focus on, you know, the immediate, but I think it pays off hugely in the end.
Well, it pays off hugely in the sense that once you get that part right, not only does your business run itself, and not only do you not have to be there anymore for your values and for your vision to be executed, but I got a real kick out of people kind of doing it the Planet Cake way. You know, that's how my business, you know, do you do it the Planet Cake way? It was something that was taken outside of my business and multiplied through multiple businesses in my industry, just because that kind of became the way of doing things. So in the long run, it actually shortens your workload and allows you to focus on your kind of genius and the vision for the business. I think that the problem is that most people wait until they're burnt out before they do this type of work.
Yeah.
And they also try to do it on their own.
Yeah.
And it's something that I would really recommend investing the money and getting a consultant in, such as yourself, and that I would really advise to do when the business is going well.
Yeah.
Rather than when the wheels fall off the bus. And take it from me, because I waited until I had absolutely no staff and was sitting in a shop all by myself before I decided I needed to do something about it. Don't wait till that point.
Yeah. Yeah. That must have been a scary moment in your career.
Oh, that, you know, I was having fantasies about changing my name to Roxy and moving to Cuba. I mean, it was just like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And also the shame, you know, I'd never heard of this happening to anybody else. Like, why me? I'm obviously terrible at what I do. Well, you know, I'd made the wrong hire.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it does happen to other people. You just didn't know about it. A lot of people, it's not something they go and shout from the hilltops.
Correct.
And it, you know, not only hiring, the same thing happens in business partnerships as well. Over and over again, I see a values mismatch in business partnerships, and it just, you know, it melts down really quickly.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. I'm just going to quickly check in on my questions here. So you said the Planet Cake way. How did you? So you initiated the values focus. How did you make sure that everybody coming into the business understood the Planet Cake way?
Well, these days I do it slightly differently. So we're going back in time to my earlier entrepreneurial days.
Yeah.
These days, I would get people to identify their own values and then see if they're matched with ours.
Yeah.
And I've got we've all got a process to do that. Or I would have someone interview them and we'd explore their values in an interview before I brought them on board. The Planet Cake way, we used to throw them in there onto the floor, and the culture was so strong, they'd either thrive or leave. And the staff would give me feedback, and because the values were embedded in our culture and part of our language, we didn't need to say these are our values, although we used to use them for disciplinary purposes. One of our values is respect. You're misaligned with our values in the way that you spoke to such and such. But they were just so strong and part of our ecosystem, and I used to call it an ecosystem, that when values are that strong, it's like being in the wrong political party. You don't feel comfortable. Everybody's a weirdo. You don't like anything that's going on, and you want to be out of there. So people would exit themselves usually. And
I think it creates almost a behavioral expectation. If you're not behaving a certain way, then what are you doing here? It just doesn't fit. And so can I ask, you said you used it sometimes from the disciplinary side of things. What about the positive reinforcement side of things? Did you do a lot of talking about when the values are shown in behavior and that sort of thing?
So I'd say one of my biggest superpowers, which I learned early on, because I had actually never managed anything prior to owning my own business. I'd always been a big critique of other managers and thought it would be really easy, and discovered how incredibly difficult it was. I found people management the most difficult part of my job. Developing brand, marketing, creating business, sales, all of that was just a walk in the park compared to managing people. I actually have said to people very openly, I think I'm a great leader, and but I don't think I'm a great CEO. And I think the two are very different.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of my superpower, it would have to be praise. And praise in areas of growth or ways that people were working. And so people were always working on ways to display our values, ways to exercise our values. And so that would be an area of praise. I mean, we would have employee of the month. The biggest thing that I found with my staff was acknowledging them on social media and in our newsletters and publicly.
Yeah.
So a lot of people find that that's a really big risk, and I'm not going to lie to you, it is a big risk. You're at risk of having your staff poached. You're also at risk of your staff getting a false sense of achievement and confidence and setting themselves up of competitors. Both those things happened. However, having them acknowledged publicly, that was huge, because not only did they get a huge amount of satisfaction from that, and we would acknowledge them publicly around values as well, but they were all of the staff were constantly striving for that recognition.
Yeah.
It was much more powerful than money or anything that we could have given them.
Yeah. Interesting. So that's a lot around retention as well. So how you keep the people on board, and I think just keeping them connected to that, and also they almost start to manage each other.
Yeah.
So, you know, they kind of weed the people who don't fit.
Yeah.
Weed themselves out almost, or people weed them out. From a recruitment perspective, just going back to that for a second, what was your strategy around recruitment? So once you were embedded and you had a team, how did you run your recruitment? Did you wait until you had an opportunity that came up? Did you have a strategy around pipelining, networking? How did that go?
Few things. First of all, I had a stint in recruitment before I had my own business. I worked for a recruitment firm for about 18 months. So I thought I'd be a great recruiter, and all of the absolute terrible hires were hired by me.
Right.
So early doors, I decided that I wasn't hiring. You know, I put the processes in place, but I worked out that I should not be the only decision maker in the recruitment process. When it was an important hire, I would get external recruiters, and I still see the value in doing that because I'm coming in with a bias, and all my staff are coming in with a bias. The one thing I know about hiring a great external recruiter, I'm not just talking about a recruitment firm, I'm talking about an experienced recruiter, is if they really understand your business, they can bring you a candidate that might add something to your business that you have not thought about before. Yeah. I'm talking about left field candidates, and I'm also talking about they can understand areas of growth that you might have a blind point to. So external recruitment was a big part of what we did. I was also, because I worked for a headhunting company, I was not adverse to headhunting.
Yeah.
And those relationships I would develop and court over a period of time. I would not approach someone and headhunt them. They would usually seek me out because we were an industry leader, and I would keep those relationships warm, and I would often have my eyes on those people in terms of future hires. Or, you know, if I lost my manager there, I know exactly where to get one. And so I was always looking to the future. People would float themselves in. So I had a lot of people pitching themselves in. So it was a combination. Did we, you know, to tell you the truth, the retention was so strong. I actually had the opposite problem in terms of getting rid of people that were becoming way too comfortable and past their use by date. That sounds really awful, but when your work starts to become an extension of your lounge room, we have a problem. That's a whole different other problem that I had. But yeah, so I really did like to consult external people, or I would approach recruiters and say, can you just do the interview process for me? Or I've got it down to a short list of 3 people, and I would seek expert advice. My bias was so strong, and I'm not afraid to admit this, that at one point I had no one in my business that could drive. because I don't drive. And at one point in my business, 80% of the people I hired were left-handed. because I'm left-handed. So
Right.
I was hiring mini me's all over the place, which was great. We were having an awesome time. It was a party. The business suffered as a result.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very, very easy trap to fall into, and difficult to acknowledge, I think, as well. So thank you for that. I do think that a lot of companies, that a lot of leaders look for people that either they just connect with and get on with, or who look like them. Oh God, he reminds me, or she reminds me of someone of me when I was younger, or it really is not.
Listen, it's natural, especially if your staff are giving you a headache, or the previous incumbent was giving you a headache. You think, God, I just want to work with someone easy. I just don't want the stress. I just want someone I'm going to talk to. They get it. They understand it. They can execute it. And it's the worst trap to fall into. Yeah. 2 of the hires that came to me via recruiters, I was so uncertain of. I just thought, these people are too stitched up, too corporate, not loose enough. They're not going to survive in this startup environment. They ended up being the most incredible employees I ever had. Worked with me for over a decade.
Yeah. My next question was going to be, you mentioned that that when you do bring in an external, that they're going to think outside of the box, or they're going to perhaps challenge you in terms of new ways of looking at it, or somebody who might be left to field. And I was going to ask you, what was the standout result for you on that front?
Oh, 2 incredible standout results. One who ended up being my tour IC, that I was overridden in the decision-making process to hire her. The recruiter brought her in, and I was just like, she is just way too stitched up. Like, she's really uptight and conservative. I just can't see her surviving here. And with me, a really true entrepreneur, hypermanic, very, very busy, poor communicator. I didn't see it working out well at all. She came from a hotel background. She was phenomenal. And what the recruiter could see that I couldn't is that I needed someone like that to manage me. And they saw that her management style was perfect for me. And in addressing some of my shortcomings. So that was a brilliant recruiter, and she was brilliant, and a 2 IC in the business. And another person ended up being a general manager, someone I wouldn't have brought in, that came from a background that I wouldn't have thought out of, again, from the hotel industry. So I mean, I was wrong, they were right. Very happy to say that. And
what made you make the final decision on them? Because obviously they presented them to you. You still had to decide to hire them.
I had a decision by committee. So that was the other mistake I kept making in my business, is having the final decision on people. Listen, if people are decision makers, and most entrepreneurs are, they make decisions like they change their socks. It's not a problem making a decision. The problem is that we make decisions very quickly based on gut, which works in business, not so good with people. And so in the end, I, unless I actively disliked someone, I was open to other people, because they had to work with the person more than I did. We would have to make a decision by consensus.
I find it interesting because people say culture fit, right? And so you're looking at culture fit, if you're working off values, purpose, that sort of connection, versus personality fit necessarily. It's a different conversation. So I think having those values and understanding what important behaviors are in the business, not necessarily style and demeanor, is a really good thing to have in place to be able to make those decisions.
Yeah, and I also think that what we can tend to do is have boss fit, personality fit, and the cult of the personality, especially with very strong entrepreneurs and business leaders. If you're a really good entrepreneur and you're a really good business leader, make no mistake, the cult of personality is fierce. And you will have a bunch of people running around you all day, every day, trying to make you happy. And that's the way it goes. I've never seen anything different. That's been my experience as well. The people that came to me from a consensus decision and from recruiters ended up being the only people in my business that stood up to me. Which is interesting. So when we say culture fit, I was actually thinking of do what I say fit all the time fit. that was what my subconscious was doing.
Yeah, oh, good on you. So yeah, I think it's something that's very, very important for leaders to take on board and to at least consider. To do it a little bit differently. If you had to give a business owner 3 key tips on you know, what they should do around hiring the right people into their business, what would you leave them with?
Values. It's not a marketing gimmick. In fact, other people don't even need to know what your values are, but you internally as a company need to know your values. And the values are, in my opinion, you might completely disagree with me, Rebecca. The values are that if you're an entrepreneur, of the entrepreneurial founder, because the company can at a certain point come up with their own values, but as a small business, there will always be the reflection of the entrepreneurial founder, and those values will override the company's. So knowing what your values are, because when you have people that are misaligned with your values, it's never going to work. That was the initial story I gave you of those guys that held me hostage in my own business. It was a values misalignment. So know your values and hire on values. Let them guide you. The second thing is to have diversity and to be open to diversity. The number of companies I consult to that want to hire young people, and we have it fall over again and again and again. And I keep saying, open it up. Look at mature age people. Look at people from different backgrounds. You can train them all the other stuff. People are so concerned with finding a personality fit or do what the boss wants fit because they've been burnt before, that they're really becoming homogenous in terms of their recruiting. And the third thing I would say is, well, I've got 4 things. The third thing I would say is write the job description first and find someone that fits the job description, not find someone and then find a job for them. And, you know, you end up with all of these people in a small business that can't do any job really well, but end up doing 5 jobs, half, 50%. And then the big key thing is to hire a recruiter. And if you can't afford that and you can't justify the expense on that, talk to a recruiter about unbundling their services. Now, I'm not sure if that's something that you do, Rebecca, but there were certainly times in my business where we couldn't afford one, or I couldn't justify it because of the job role. I would go to them and say, can you just do the interviews? Can we find everybody and then you just do this part? Or, you know, can you give us some advice on what we're looking for here, or whatever it might be? And I found that invaluable. Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you. Now, you said that the first thing you were saying around, I had another question coming off that, but I was too busy listening to your wonderful points. The first thing you just said around values. And you were talking about the entrepreneurial values, so focusing on that. Do you think that there are different phases in a business where a business needs to stop again, take stock and reevaluate the values that are now required to move into the next phase?
And that's usually when I get out.
Right.
So I'll tell you how it goes.
Okay.
An entrepreneurial founder starts a business.
The
business is a reflection of that entrepreneur or founder's mind up until the point where governance comes in. So as soon as governance starts coming in, like systems and processes, and we need a board and, you know, blah, 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 that's when a new set of values comes in. And usually my advice to that entrepreneur would be move out of the way and let a professional CEO come in as well. Now, entrepreneurs don't like to hear that, but I say to them, there's another business waiting in the sunset just for you with your name on it. You can go to that. And so there are phases of the business. And the second phase, which is when governance comes in and we're established business and we're just looking at possibly kind of growing and scaling, but really the foundations have been done and all the work's been done. That's really when you come in with your next set of values and your governance and all of the rest of it. Up until that point, the values, and I don't care if you sit down and come up with a different set of them, are a reflection of the founder. And I'll give you a spectacular example of that. So let's look at Uber and all of the problems with Uber. So that obviously is an example of a company that grew way too quickly and scaled way too quickly. But what happened there is that company's values and culture was still a reflection of the CEO. Now, we can talk about him in great depth if you want to, but he's just a typical, to me, startup CEO. Fly by the seat of his pants cowboy.
Yeah.
And those values would have been perfect to scale the business. Obviously they were, because he was spectacularly successful in doing it. But there was a point that they missed where, you know, we should have brought in some governments and a new set of values and a new culture, etc.
Yeah. And I think so that's really hard, like you say, for an entrepreneur to accept.
Very hard.
And I suppose it depends on your vision for the business long term and future and all of that. But certainly that's probably more so where I would step into working with the company around helping them reignite the culture in a sense. And a lot of the time, some of the people that you've got in the business, unfortunately, probably need to change as well. So, you know, unless they're going to be able to change their you know, with the new values and the new focus, etc. But I think you, at that point, dare I say, you tend to get a little bit of, oh gosh, what's the word? A lot of my teenager has it. Lost the word, but you know, so that they feel like they're owed something, you know, or that they have the right to be there and continue.
Oh, right. So entitlement.
Thank you. Do you know what? That word goes out of my head nearly every time I try to use it.
I mean, I'm not surprised at all. It's horrible to come past across entitled people. I think now I understand the life cycle of a business better. So we have to have a look at businesses in terms of life cycles. What entrepreneurs and founders are really good at, you have to be good at two things to be a super successful entrepreneur. You have to be good at innovation and you have to be good at marketing. You have to be brilliant at them. So if we look at Steve Jobs, that's what he was brilliant at, marketing and innovation. And every born entrepreneur I meet has got these two things nailed. Now, that's fantastic. And we can usually take it up to, you know, a certain point in the business. But what does a CEO need? And what does a company that's established need? It needs someone that's a great people manager, that's great at managing shareholders, that's great that's managing up to a board, that's good with systems and processes, that's good at standardizing behavior and product across different departments and scaling it. Then that's slow growth, bringing it up. Well, I mean, if we're good at innovation and marketing, we're not going to be good at all of that stuff. And
you get the rare.
I would argue that most of those people are CEO entrepreneurs to begin with. So they're usually partnering up with inventors or marketers or innovators. They're not innovators and marketers, because we're looking at an artist versus a builder. And so what happens is the artists don't have an escape route or a backup plan. They're not happy either. Anyone listening to this, you have to acknowledge, if you're sitting there right now and, you know, the business is established, it's as boring as. So that's when you bring in someone like, you bring in someone like Rebecca, you bring in someone with grey hair, a great CEO, and you move on to the next opportunity. And you'll only have that when you detox from this one for a while. But yes, you're absolutely right. That's a long way of saying that's when the next CEO or the next governance process, or you as a consultant, brings in the next set of values and behaviors, because it's going to be a totally different culture. And you're right, it needs a staff change as well.
Fantastic. And so one more question for you. Can you give me 3 tips you would leave with a business owner in terms of retaining their talent? I think we've talked about a lot of them, but what are your top 3 tips?
Okay, well, I mean, everyone talks about culture, but what are we really talking about? Make sure your staff are happy. If you focus on having happy staff, you'll retain them. So I focus just on their happiness.
Yeah.
So that includes morale. So I would be out there working the floor and having contact with them. I made sure no matter how big we were that I would mop the floors on Tuesday evenings. Now that's a big deal in a huge, big factory. I would mop the floors with them. And I would work Saturdays and I would work Sundays. All the things that other people hated and wouldn't do, I always led from behind. So to keep morale up, to keep people happy. We had mental health days. I showed I cared. It doesn't take much to make people happy. Just think about the way that you would keep your own family happy.
Yeah.
You're looking after their health, their well-being. You're checking in with them. You're interested in them. You remember their names. You don't expect them to be servants to you and serve you. You expect to work alongside them. Yeah. So happiness is the number one. If you focus on happiness, you'll retain your staff, no problem. Number two, making sure that your values guide behavior, not you.
Yeah.
If the values are there and they're strong and you talk about them every single day and your staff, they're part of your staff language and you reward them with public recognition, awards, promotions, bonuses, whatever, then it won't become a you versus them culture. So instead of saying, Bobby, you know, I've noticed you've been going really slowly lately. You're annoying everyone. Everyone's had it with you and your mood is affecting everyone because you're basically an entitled little brat. I can say, Bobby, you know, one of our values is optimism. You haven't been displaying that value. It's been really difficult for your teammates to work with you. So that's a misalignment with another value, which is teamwork. Do you want to talk me through that? Is there anything wrong? Because if the misalignment of values continues, then you have to consider whether this is the right place for you to work. Yeah. I take it away from myself and I'm able to let the values do all the dirty work for me. Yeah, that was just a total game changer. And that retains staff. And it also, the values underpin our culture, which is fantastic. And I think the third thing, I mean, there's so many things, but I really think the third thing is making their dreams come true. So what do you want? Like, if you want to work overseas, let's make that happen for you. If you want to end up working 4 days a week, let's see what I can do to make that happen. You want flexible hours? Let me see what I can do there. You know, because they all have different needs. Some are single parents, others are migrants. Yeah. Other people were very, very ambitious. Other people wanted a work-life balance. I had some recovering from cancer. I had others that had OCD and mental health things. It's not a homogenous, you know, across the board thing. Yeah. Everybody is an individual. When you start treating people like human beings being the operative word, rather than a resource, you'll retain them.
Yeah. And all those things that you've just given, thank you so much, go to any size business at any stage of their development. So you go beyond the entrepreneurial bit. You've still, if you are, you know, honoring those things in people and treating them as human beings and allowing vulnerability and realness, you have every chance of keeping them. I don't think, you know, it's probably not healthy to keep people forever. So knowing where your limits are around that is important too. But I think, you know, that's phenomenal advice. I just finished a post on LinkedIn. I was a bit late today, but it was all about humanness in the workplace.
All
the things we're talking about here really resonate with just a thought I had this morning, and just also on why people don't necessarily, why so many people don't bring their humanness to work.
Wearing that mask to work, it's so dreadful. Like, what is that? And you can feel it. You walk into an organization and it feels dead. If your staff aren't happy, I can feel it instantly if your staff aren't happy. Even if they put on their fake smile, you can feel it. So happy staff, a vulnerable leader, and all of those values and stuff means that your staff it's contagious. My clients, all of them, without question, kept coming back and paying 3 times more with me than they would with my competitor for my culture. I know that because they would say, I just come here because I love it. It's so happy. I love, they would develop relationships with my staff. My staff would go out of their way and do the most incredible things without me even knowing, just to keep spreading it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it pays business dividends. It's not just woo-woo, nice to have stuff. It
Yeah.
actually affects your bottom line for sure.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's been
Good.
such a powerful conversation. And I get very sort of lit up by this. And so thank you. I think you do too, which is awesome.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. So thank
Yeah.
you so much
So,
for having me
you're
and
very welcome.
telling my stories. And lovely to speak to everybody out there, whoever's listening.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Paris. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.